Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. This is the exact perfect amount of people that I wanted here today. So pretty much how this talk is going to work is it's myself and Tima. I'll introduce ourselves in a second. We're from Alta, and so we are a virtual reality company. I'm going to do a short little talk. I'm terrible at speaking off bullet points, so I'm actually probably will have my head down reading off something, but hopefully it will be interesting enough to view things on here. And then after that, it's going to be a short talk. I didn't prepare too much, but we're just going to have a short Q&A and just a room discussion. Anything that you found interesting about what I talked about, anything I said kind of sparked any ideas of discussion, and we can all just have a really great discussion about harassment prevention in VR, which is what this is about. So I'll introduce us. My name's Justine Colla, so I'm Alta's co-founder and community lead. I've got 6 years industry experience and I've worked on 8 different game projects. I'm deeply passionate about diversity in game development, especially women in tech. And I like to think that I have a really empathetic approach to the game design. It's something that I've always been very passionate about, especially being someone who has experienced harassment in online multiplayer games in the past. So becoming a game developer, I want to get rid of those experiences and make sure it's always a positive experience for everyone. This is Tima. He's Alta's co-founder and CEO. He pays my salary. He worked on LA Noire and other AAA titles with Rockstar, Activision, and Warner Brothers. He was a lead VR designer on a AAA VR secret game before co-creating Alta with the rest of my team. And Tima values technology and logical thinking, so he's the exact opposite from me. But at least we have both sides of the coin. All right, so I think that wraps up introductions, and I'll get started with the talk. Now, here we go. Everything's been leading to this moment. All right. So virtual reality, it's captivating, it's immersive, it's revolutionary. It's a platform where we, the player, can attach a pair of magic plastic goggles to our head and be transposed to an endless array of alternate universes. Some are realistic, some are abstract. Some take advantage of the nostalgia of past games that you only dreamed to enter physically. Now you can. In short, VR is extraordinary. Of these experiences, the most deeply engaging ones are those which are social, sharing the wonders of VR worlds with a buddy, a party, or even a stranger. However, as unpredictable as social multiplayer can be, a fun experience can be turned into a negative one. I'd ask for a show of hands, but I can pretty much guarantee that everyone in the room at some point has been felt bullied, harassed, or discriminated against in a multiplayer video game. We all know how the story goes. Unfortunately, at times, the VR gaming space can be extremely discriminatory, even compared to general online gaming spaces. VR is built for humans. It replicates the human experience. Therefore, VR is for humans of all races, genders, sexuality, and religions. As developers, we have an extremely important responsibility to make sure that our apps are as inclusive and accepting as possible, because VR safety starts with us. We must focus on the foundation of our development to forge incredible experiences for diverse audiences, thereby expanding the VR market and cultivating positive behaviours in online play. Harassment in VR is very serious and is an extremely real issue that the platform currently faces. My thing isn't working. Sorry, guys. Okay. Wait. Yes. By now, I would assume it's safe to say that most, if not everyone here, has read the medium.com article, "I was sexually assaulted in virtual reality. This is a big fucking problem." And yeah, it is. It's a massive problem. Talk surrounding sexual harassment in the VR space has gently been on people's lips over the past few years, mostly in the developer space, but this is the first time that an article of this nature has reverberated beyond the gaming community. If you haven't had a chance to read it, the short story is that the author, Jordan Bellemire, entered the single player of the game Quiver, so it's QuiVR, it's a little play on words, where you play as an archer shooting down zombies. It's a great game and really, really fun. However, Jordan, who identifies as female, entered the multiplayer and the story continues as follows. In between a wave of zombies and demons to shoot down, I was hanging out next to Big Bro 442, waiting for our next attack. Suddenly, Big Bro 442's disembodied helmet faced me dead on. His floating head approached my body and he started to virtually rub my chest. "Stop," I cried. I must have laughed from the embarrassment and the ridiculousness of the situation. Women, after all, are supposed to be cool and take any form of sexual harassment with a laugh, but I still told him to stop. This goaded him on, and even when I turned away from him, he chased me around, making grabbing and pinching motions near my chest. Emboldened, he even shoved his hand towards my virtual crotch and began rubbing. This happened 3 minutes into Jordan's experience of VR, all because when Big Bro 442 heard her speak and her voice sounded feminine. Otherwise, the avatars in Quiver look identical to each other, like floating helmets with hands. And just so everyone knows, Jordan was very complimentary about the game itself, but her experience was tainted by Big Bro 442, and who knows if Jordan, if not any other player who endures this kind of harassment, will want to go back and play the game again. Harassment in VR, let alone someone's personal account of it, is confronting to hear, but it is the unfortunate truth, one we should consider seriously and with wholehearted compassion. Safety in VR is not something to turn a blind eye to or minimize its importance to the platform as a whole. If anything, player safety is the most important aspect of VR. One of the most critical things to consider when developing for VR is users retain memories in VR as they experience it in real life. I want you to think back to a non-VR game that you've recently played. Think about playing Pokemon Go, a game that literally puts your favorite characters from the Pokemon game into your real-world space. Even though this is one of the more immersive game experiences we as a community have had in recent memory, you still retain those memories of the experiences, aware of the suspension of disbelief that exists as you play. When you recall an experience in VR, you remember it as if it happened to you in real life. There's a moment I can personally recall from the Everest VR experience. I was crawling out of my tent and I stand up and I'm standing on the side of this snowscape with the most inspiring 360 view of the Milky Way stretching across the twinkling sky. I think back to that memory and I have to remind myself that I was playing a VR experience and that I was not actually on the mountainside of Everest. But my heart swells and I get goosebumps when I think of that moment as if I was really there. This is the core magic of VR. But it is also the dreaded double-edged sword. VR is a confronting medium in all aspects. Your personal space in VR feels like your personal space in real life. If you've played an online MMO like World of Warcraft, you can probably recall yourself and hundreds of other people standing around about in Ironforge or Orgrimmar, stacked on top of one another like pixelated sardines. Some people may find it a little claustrophobic, but all in all, you still have a disconnect from your own physical personal space in the real world and that of your player character in the game. In that situation, we are only role players, no matter how much of ourselves we can project onto our Warcraft character. For most social VR and open world VR experiences currently, teleportation is the easiest mode of transport. It is used in an experience called Alt-Space VR, which is currently the most popular social VR multiplayer, which emulates real-world spaces in VR, like watching a movie with friends or going in a jungle or things like that. It's kind of like Second Life for VR. Using this mode of transportation, it's easy to accidentally teleport directly on top of another person, and this can be a very confronting experience, even with someone you trust. Unless you've experienced VR, it's quite difficult to describe just how immersive it is. When the experience is designed correctly, you really believe that you're there. So when another player is invading your personal space in VR, you get all the same emotional reactions of being harassed in real life. Shock, anxiety, physically feeling ill. Your real-life fight or flight defense mechanisms kick in. It's visceral and it can be genuinely terrifying. Except you can't actually defend yourself in VR. You can't physically shove someone's avatar away from you like you could a human body in real life. And this is how abusers can take advantage of harassment, because they have all the power to make you feel uncomfortable with none of the consequences. On its community standards page, Altspace VR says it doesn't tolerate harassment by users and threatens that continued harassed behaviour will result in suspension and subsequent determination as to whether the account will be closed permanently. Altspace VR already has at least one feature that is meant to allow users to prevent harassment, an ignore function that, when enabled, freezes another user's avatar in place inside the virtual world, essentially muting them. But the ignore feature doesn't prevent the first instance of harassment in the first place, and users can't be expected to manually ignore every potential abuser in a multiplayer game. The most upsetting fact is that judging by the Altspace VR users who are reporting this harassment, the levels of incidents are disconcertingly high. At GDC earlier this year, Patrick Harris from Minority Media conducted a truly horrifying experiment where he role-played as an abuser in VR and preyed upon female players without their consent. Footage of this was shown to those in attendance, and the video cuts between the woman's palpable discomfort and Harris's increasingly disturbing victimizing tactics. Afterward, Harris apologised profusely for the way that he acted during the game session and was so stricken by how real the experience felt that he immediately felt an overwhelming sense of guilt, which is great for him, I guess, but it does little for the woman who was the victim in this situation, who went on to describe the events as a damaging experience and will most likely be dealing with the after effects of this harassment for a long time. VR is still in its early stages as a platform, and we don't have all the answers yet, and we're not going to get it right on the first try. But it's important to start setting rules and positive, progressive social norms in virtual spaces so that the platform can't be abused early. Cultivation of safe experiences will expand the VR platform globally and keep high levels of users coming back to VR experiences if they can be guaranteed to be secure. Remember the Quiver incident we spoke about just before? The developers, Aaron Stanton and Joran Schechner, wrote an answer article. They were devastated to discover that the game in the original article was their own one, as they had developed it to be as inclusive as possible. The models deliberately have no gender identity, and the game is built around the concept called cooperative independence, the idea that players are side by side, but gameplay is not dependent on anybody else. Interaction is purely voluntary. But it wasn't enough. Abusers still managed to harass other players. At the time of the incident, Quiver had a personal bubble system in place which would cause another player's hands to disappear if they came close in front of another player's face. This was to prevent someone blocking another's view during gameplay, but they hadn't considered extending the fading function to the rest of the body to prevent digital groping. And I can't believe this story has just made me have to say digital groping. Quiver upgraded the personal bubble feature to cause a player's entire avatar to fade out when they got close to another. They call this system the power gesture. When a player puts both hands together holding the triggers and pulls their hands apart, they can make abusers disappear from their vicinity. It's like a superhero summoning a force field. It's supposed to feel empowering. And harassment prevention doesn't necessarily have to be dealt in punishments. Daydream Labs prevents trolling from happening in their experiences by giving positive feedback for positive behaviour. In an experiment they did, the team found that players loved giving other players a high five, especially when the interaction featured a loud slapping sound and firework animations. This distracted players from potentially wanting to bully others because the positive feedback system is so rewarding. These are only a few examples of solutions that have been developed so far. It's clear to see that they all still have their flaws. Safety in VR is going to be an iterative process. No one has a magic answer yet, but one thing has become incredibly clear. VR safety is a design issue. VR safety should be built into gameplay and into the very framework of those experiences that are made. It's not something that should be shoehorned into the product further down the development pipeline when the abuse starts happening. With every new gameplay feature that we as developers make, we need to be asking ourselves, how could someone abuse this? What are ways that we can explore this that will not cause experimental harm to others? And who can we look to for help? The Quiver developers were so shook by Jordan being harassed in their game that they have contributed their code for the personal bubble to the amazing open source framework VR Toolkit. To me, this is where it starts to get exciting. Imagine the VR industry with its developers working together and brainstorming cross-product to create truly safe experiences in VR. Safety features should be open source, and development discussion must be encouraged across the global industry. More importantly, your users and players need to be sure that if they report experiences of harassment in our titles, that their voices will be heard and that the developers genuinely care about them. We can only speculate how many incidents of harassment in VR haven't been reported, a trend which is unfortunately common with victims of abuse in real life. And personally, that really saddens me. Fantastic VR developer groups are beginning to spring up, like the Virtual Reality Content Creators Group on Facebook, which has a solid focus on objective discussion and inclusive community. I urge everyone to seek out a diverse team, the true foundation of building a healthy organisation. Call upon everyone's unique life experiences to forge incredible VR experiences for diverse audiences and expand the VR market to cultivate positive behaviours in online play. As developers in the VR industry, this should be our primary goal. Our users are depending on us. Safety in VR is our responsibility, and it is a very serious issue, but we don't have to do it alone. So I urge everyone to revolutionise VR together. Thank you. So this is the part where we have a little discussion.
One more thing, like I think, we have a little bit of time. So
yeah, we have heaps of time.
So I'll talk about, this issue from business side. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go there. So
you have to talk in front of these things.
Yeah, I'll talk around there. So. So who works in VR first of all? So we clear, yeah. So like from my perspective, is like where this issue started coming up is actually from VR. Is about I think 6 months ago, 7 months ago. Riot Games, obviously one of the biggest studios in the world, released an article where they're saying, they start basically firing their employees for harassing, players in game, right? So like people go play League, and they're part of the company, and then they do something stupid, which wasn't that bad. Like it would be like if you look at this, yes, it's harassment, but it's not crazy harassment, and you get fired for that. And obviously as a dev, like people who you work with, are really important to you. So it's a pretty big decision to fire someone over making someone's life difficult, just typing text into the field. And obviously, like I'm coming from like professional gaming background, and that's kind of part of the culture in a way, right? Like you go in forums, you troll, obviously 15 years ago. And then I have some friends there, and they're like, hey guys, why are you doing that? It's kind of crazy, where you're firing people over, they just made mistake, And what they told me that the data shows that it's actually in terms of, the growth, and how they acquire users, that's the biggest problem, because if people come, they track, number of interactions, which is positive versus the number of interactions, which is negative, right? And then as soon as you have a negative interaction, then your growth rate like basically stalls. So you might lose a person, which like, for example, in mobile gaming, whales is a big thing. So imagine you whale, which might spend $20,000 on your game. And then just by having negative interaction, one, we're not talking about many, one, they might drop out, right? Like what's the impact? And also like, every user is a multiplier. Like every user will tell other user, how the game is. So it also has a negative impact not only on that user, but every other user they communicate with. And so that's like when we started like Alta. Obviously we started doing our social multiplayer title Township Tale. I'm like, okay, obviously VR sickness is quite a thing which is if you're sick in VR first time around, you're never going to come back to it. That's clear. But that we found out like as soon as you go there and you have any harassment situation, you'll never come back to it again. And the problem is magnified because generally right now VR is very like early adopter kind of market, right? So most of the experience are like first-person shooters, aimed at guys who have big, machines with GTX 1070, 1080s, 980s, and like down the line, as a company, we try to look not like what's happening right now, what can I ship right now, but what's going to happen in 2 to 5 years time. And it's clear that it's going to be, if it all goes well, it's going to be pretty much 50-50 market. It's going to be 50 males, 50 females, and also other genders as well. And like if today female goes into VR experience, and it's like to start with, there's minority of them to begin with, and then they get abused, then there's a quite big chance it might lose like 50% of our market before even like starting. And that really scares me as a VR developer. It's like, hey, what we're thinking about. So in terms of our processes, like it's, you have to understand there is virtual realities, especially like social one is difficult equation to manage, because obviously it's not like law there, right? Like there's no like legal framework where like, if in real life something happens, there is a process which, creates outcomes which other people say don't do it, right? But at the same time, you have players which are really engaged and they want to, role play, right? It's part of the games, you role play, and that's how do we adjust, people who want to do, things which might not, other people not find appropriate. So, and the way kind of we think about it is that like, let's make it a safe environment first. Like, let's go from the beginning, like, as Justine was talking about, if we, save bubbles, making sure that it's clear up front, what the, expectation of user behavior is, right? Like they come into the game, they have to be aware of what's going on. And then if the people want something more, then, we provide them the service settings, because where they can select what they want to do. Because I don't want to limit VR in terms of, you can have beautiful moments in VR, people can literally fall in love in VR. There's no difference between VR and anything else. But like if you have personal bubbles, enforced, then, how is the communications going to happen, right? So it's very, it's a very tricky balance. But you really have to, like when you build it, you say, okay, let's make it safe first, and then build system in place where, it's up to users to decide, how they want to set their own environment up, right? And this has to be communicated. So like if somebody is new to the game, they come online and they're like, hey, I want to play some VR, so default experience is really safe. But then there's some like hardcore players which like say, hey, I'm gonna, you in your house in VR, I'm gonna invade you in night, right? Might be not, and like I will be, in your face. Like it might be a good experience, but still, like, you have to kind of opt in, right, into that. So, and that's kind of our thinking as a studio moving forward. But I think every VR developer should think about it because, in 2 years, VR is multiplayer. That's what I'm thinking, right? Because, like, obviously lots of people can disagree, but that's where it's going. Like all the big studios, all the, big VC companies, that's what they're looking for. And that's what experience is, when it's talk VR, people, people who haven't been in VR, they don't imagine, zombie shooter, shooting around. They imagine Matrix, Inception. That's what people, like, that's what we're selling as VR developers, right? Like, hey, what's VR? And you're like, hey, do you know Matrix, right? And then everybody like, hey, I know what you're talking about, right? So that's where it's going, but you have to provide tools to make sure that you're not going to lose your users because you're going to lose them pretty fast. Like, when you go in real market and then abuse goes into the system, then people drop out. So that's the business side of what VR, what's going to be future of VR. Any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, don't want to keep everyone too long. I know you're tired. It's the end of the day.
Yep.
Okay, so like obviously a lot of it is about encouraging people to stay and not experience abuse in the first place. Is there any like way that you can think of to discourage abusers from trying that in the first place and not feeling acceptable to do it in that space?
I mean, you can do like things like bans, etc. But like for example, like personal bubble is a good one. It's not even possible to abuse, right? Like maybe mute straight away. First environment, like because what we're having running right now, it's like pretty like I wouldn't even advise having sound. It's up to you to opt in to have sound in. So like it's up to like audio device, not even to talk only to your friends. That's like, it seems crazy, like, hey, well, why? It's all these features in the game, why you're not allowing other people to do it? Well, because as soon as, like, statistically, data-wise, like, as soon as somebody says, F something this, then you're out, right? You're never coming back.
Yeah.
So is it worth it? Or it's more like, hey, I'm in this community, I know who my friends are. It's like same as, like, your chat list, right? Like the only people you have there are the ones which you trust, like your Facebook page, right? There is no one. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think something that is really going to open up that market is when VR starts invading real life spaces. So VR shopping, and there'll be VR, anything VR that is not games, and like VR multimedia and stuff like that. It all depends on the market opening up, so a more diverse audience has access to VR. And at that point, because right now VR and games, it is, the diversity in VR games is very unbalanced, and it is very currently male dominated. But I think that's just because that demographic likes to spend a lot more money on brand new product, gaming product. But until people really have those amazing VR experiences in real life, they'll consider, oh hey, maybe I want to try out these VR games. And I hear there's like IMVU and stuff like that are so incredibly popular with all genders. And once people start finding out that it's not all shooters and not all zombie games, then people, I think, will really, all genders will really start gravitating towards VR and really start investing their money into headsets. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Yep.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, good.
Okay.
I think something that was really awesome that the the guys who produced Quiver, and you kind of mentioned it as well, what they did is they created that protection bubble, and they worked on empowering the person or the victim. But like, how do you work on something you also mentioned about preventing that first incident from even happening? Like that woman who became the victim, she's already a victim, and like she's gonna, as you said, deal with that for the rest of her life potentially. And like, how do we educate companies to focus on the preventative measures rather than a reactionary measure?
That's like,
sorry.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And that's something I wish that I could answer for you. But that's why I wanted to do this talk, because the thing that I hope that people get out of this is that we really need to start talking about it, and we really need to start global discussion. And I don't think there's really any kind of worldwide developer VR kind of forum yet that is widespread use that we can all kind of opt into and start really talking about this. So yeah, I wish I could answer it, but I can't. I just hope that this continues the conversation with your peers and your fellow developers, and that we can all make sure that people realize that safety is like the most important thing in VR before any kind of other gameplay starts to come in.
But I mean, also like how you spend your money, right? Like it's, and how you react to the product, right? Like if, yeah, like it's up to us to educate consumer. You know, if you go play the game, you're unhappy about it, you have to tell that. You know, ask for, you know, especially on Steam, it's much easier to ask for money back, right? So, and like people don't really realize that VR is really unisex platform. Like, you know, we're demoing our game, you know, regardless who it is, you know, they have, it's because it's real life. You know, there's no such thing as, you know, VR is for this kind of people, that kind of people. It's basically a copy, like it's like a layer on top of what's happening in real life. So you just, you know, people gonna vote with their dollars. You know, like you create experiences which are safe, which are friendly to, you know, mass market. You know, everybody else will follow.
And I think that
like we follow League, right? Like you know, we following somebody's steps. You know, like we obviously some people make mistakes, but we're like, hey, the data's out there. They're telling you, if you allow abuse, you're gonna get less sales. Like it's okay, if you create hardcore game, then you're not gonna get any audience, right? Okay, you're gonna get your bros, but how much you gonna sell?
And I think that if you have a really good system in place where if harassment happens, they can report it immediately, and if users see you actually taking that into consideration and actually working hard and quickly on steps to prevent that. Like Quiver did an amazing job by writing that answer article, because that showed to everyone who read the first article that they saw that they took it really personally and they took measures to change that. And I bet that, well, I hope that Jordan, who was the woman who was abused in the first place, would be like, wow, they really listen to me and they really care, and might give it another go.
Because, you know, sorry, I'm completely holding this.
No, it's all right.
But for example, like in League, yeah, sure, you can report someone, but that person doesn't know that you've reported them. That person has no idea that they've been reported for harassment. And how do I, as a player as well, how do I know that anything's going to happen to that guy? Yeah, sure, I can report him for all sorts of things. Then what? That disappears into an...
Exactly. I think that's a fantastic idea, is that if you get reported by someone else, that there are negative things that happen to, yeah.
Hey, you can report.
But I mean, like for me, it's like the key is like don't build experience which allows this in the first place, right? Like you really have to opt in like, because like internally we talk about like more dynamic systems, you know, like giving weapons to players. So like if they, you know, if somebody harassing you, kill them, right? But it's not solving the problem. It's just kind of, you know, you protected it.
Preventative rather than
Yeah.
Maybe to answer your question, I think it was a Left 4 Dead or League of Legends, what they Valve talk about like psychology of game mechanics and things. And what they did is when you reported someone for being offensive, they banned the player or gave the player a warning, and they also gave you feedback of saying, hey, because of your report, we have temp banned that player for like 10 games. And they, since they introduced that, they showed statistics that the numbers of reports for offensive chats has gone down drastically, like overall. So just by giving the player like a feedback that they know they can ban someone, they become less sort of offensive to other people because they know there's a consequence to what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish more things would do that.
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, one of the reasons that it's so prevalent in virtual environment, whether it's a third person or a VR experience, is because there is no consequence. So people can engage in this behaviour that they hopefully don't do in real life.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah, because I'm
Big road.
44 or whatever, you know, you are just this entity, you know, yeah, you can get away with anything. Another question that, I don't know, maybe it's a technical question, and it is sort of, I guess, the preventative. You mentioned, I think Justine said at the beginning, that you can teleport anywhere in VR, so you can teleport on top of somebody. And obviously I've experienced it on not in VR, but in console games and online games where the other avatar doesn't exist, so you can run through them. How possible technically is it to sort of not allow that, to say, okay, well, there is a region?
No, it's quite simple.
Yeah.
So you can't basically...
No.
Because there's a marker, so like, for example, in a township tale, there's a marker when you're teleporting somewhere.
I experienced that yesterday. So you can't, to build that in, I wasn't sure whether or not it was a technical bottleneck that, you sort of...
No, there's no...
I should have mentioned that, but yeah.
To sort of start giving everybody
Yeah, it's more of a design issue, like if you have, for example, close combat in the game, which is all obviously awesome and fun, how do you prevent people, you know, it's a close combat for a reason, right?
Well, you could have like a dueling system.
Sorry?
If you could start a duel with someone, and then that just removes the personal bubble for the duration of the duel, and then once it's back again.
So there's like but it's more like what game you're building and what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
But like obviously that's, you know, it's design choices, right? What do you do and how you do it best. But at the same time, like if you're in combat situation, it's much harder to harass, right? Because you're gonna get killed, right? So it's not as bad as you just, you know, in normal social situation, right? You're talking and then somebody start, you know, out of blue harassing, you know, you have like no weapons, nothing. So and that's why we brought the game here, just to try to see what's the issues are. And obviously, like teleportation is quite a big issue because like sometimes just randomly happens, right? Because two people in the scene, they're just doing things, you know, picking up objects. You know, I see this mushroom, you see this mushroom, we both want to pick it up, and then suddenly, like I'm like like in somebody's face, you know, basically. And it's like the problem with VR is that there is no filter in terms of you can't logically think about things, right? It's still like, you know, it's fight or flight. You know, your biology kicks in. And there's nothing developer can do at this point, right? I can't control your biology, right?
I know there has been a time with like, I trust these guys with my life, and we were just testing out stuff in VR, and because we were using the HTC, I had, I think our designer accidentally just teleported right on top of me, and it was like, I was like next to a wall like this, and I was like, just the flight kicked in, and I went back, and then I like hit myself on the wall, and it's like, this is other things, is like, there can actually be like real world consequences. That was in an early build though, but we're really excited for PAX because we actually haven't had too many gamers get hands on the game yet. Our first was actually at Unite, and
yesterday,
yeah, that was really exciting for us because gamers just intuitively just pick it up and they want to explore and they're very curious, and it's just amazing to see how people interact with the game, or actual consumers interact with the game, and we can't wait to get all the data and then have a big discussion about how we can move forward with the safety part, because we really want to, if we can come up with something that was like revolutionary and like, wow, like that's, and like something exciting that we come up with that we can share with everyone, that would just like make my life. But yeah, really excited for the data that we're gonna get.
because we do have problems, like we're like any other VR studio, because it's like in terms of development, it's a big investment, like especially you don't even know, like we don't have a publisher right now, we don't have anybody big backing us up, so like internally just, you know, making choices where to invest is, but we think it will definitely long term is worthwhile. You know, if you can say, you know, your game is safe out of the gate, you know, you're gonna get a lot of people who may be turned off, because again, these people still bought the devices, right? So like in order to play in VR, you have to have a device, so they might come back, right? Like if you say, hey, it's a safe experience, so we'll see. Well,
question. Oh, sorry, there's a question down the back. I think she was.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, earlier you were saying that VR is inherently unisex, which has the capacity that exists like space and real world space is unisex. But I don't know if that's quite true. I think a lot of spaces that we perceive to be unisex are like masculine spaces where other genders are permitted to be. Like if you think about town planning, it's really male oriented.
sorry,
other genders also get to come through there.
what's your example? I didn't catch.
Town planning.
You were saying
Town planning, yeah.
Unisex.
Yeah, I mean not like physical world. I mean just world in general. Like, you know, people in general are unisex. Because I totally understand, like, you know, like we design this world as we design anything else, and some things are designed towards certain sexes. But I'm saying inherently, there is nothing specific to VR which makes it. You know, it's up to designer to decide which way he wants to go.
Well, my question is, when you're designing these virtual spaces, are you thinking about, is this accessible to people and enjoyable to people in all genders?
Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
100%,
yeah.
I'm just thinking it's analogous to a unisex space in the real world, therefore it automatically is unisex, because I think that would leave someone down the path of assuming that, oh, a conference centre, for example, is inherently unisex, therefore a VR version is also, without examining these spaces equally accessible.
I think that's absolutely a fantastic point. And I think it's just good to note that we are so early in development. We've only been a company for 2 months, and we've only been developing a Township Tale for 4. And this is our first experience when we're actually going to see people, our consumers, interact with the game. And diversity is incredibly important to me, and I will fight. It is the hill that I will die on. And so I want to make sure that all my friends who identify as anything can get into our game and feel like they belong. But I wish I could give you a more solid answer.
But I mean, like, just for technical side, it's a good question, because obviously it's like the way that your team is structured is really important. Like, because we've been struggling with that quite a bit, because our team right now, Justine, well, I mean, our core team of 4 is Justine is only female, so there's basically 3 dudes on the team, and yeah, exactly, yeah, and that's where that's a problem, like, you know, and that's why, you know, going forward to try to balance the team as much as possible, because even like the way Justine comes, you know, like, you know, one of the features, like, because guys obviously more combat, like guys like, hey, bow, archery, that's the way to go, and then Justine like, hey, right, like, and Justine like, well, my features, like, I want flowers, and
because there were flowers in the original prototype, and I was like, I really would just want to put it in my hair. And so Joel, our amazing programmer, put that together in like an afternoon, and now like you can pick up a flower in the game and put it in your hair. And it was just like, accessorizing is very important to me. But that was, a cool feature that obviously we wouldn't have had if...
Yeah, if it was just us, right? Because in the beginning, like internal discussion, like we're free discussing, it's like, this is dumb, like this is like...
So that's the classic idea in diversity,
Yeah, I mean, it's like a structure of your team, right? Like, because like obviously everybody has different background. Everybody came, like, I'm pro gamer, like I like specific things, and when I design or I want to provide feedback, but I'm aware that, you know, I'm not mainstream, right? Like every decision I make, so we just try to like really hard to balance the team and to make sure that, you know, like another feature we have which we didn't implement is mirror, right? Like, because right now there's no mirror in the game, so but it's true, yeah. But you can actually have the character can have the face. So obviously, I don't use mirror in real life. You know, it's probably you guessed. So, but like, you know, a lot of other people do it. A lot of people do, right? So, and for them, it would be like, oh, where's my flower? How does it look? You know, what else can I put in my face, right? So, but it's like, but yeah, it has to be. It's the team composition. That's like, there's nothing, and obviously you have to make sure that everybody on equal footing, because obviously Justine is not programmer, right? And she's not like official vision holder on the project, right? So she's much more on marketing side. But in the end of the day, like, you know, it really helped. Like, you know, everyone we demoed, like as soon as you can put flower in your head, like it's a 100% smile. It's a feature which like works. Like even talking about it, you're smiling about it, right? Like I don't even need to sell it, but it's like it works. Like, you know, like same as like when the guys like, you know, with the bow shoot and then like you know, the arrow is like in their head, they're like awesome, you know. But it's like, it's right. So and that's what social spaces are, right? Like it's different people that bring in different things to the table and interact differently. So with, you know, with the world. Yeah.
I think that's something that's going to be really interesting when you try it out at PAC, for example, that you're going to get feedback from a whole bunch of people who are very different to you.
Yeah.
So often you'll find that games that have been created by, using as an example, as, you know, white dudes that love shooter games, and then they, you know, try it out, and then they wonder, oh, I wonder why only guys are playing our game. And you kind of have to start evaluating that and thinking, you know, how do we bring other people to our game?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, mobile does it really well. Like, you know, especially in Australia, like mobile, like, you know, even like the mainstream mobile titles, like, you know, even Crossy, or if you look at that, they look, you know, you can't really say it's specific gender, right? Like it's very like unisex, you know, and every, even like what's it called, Rodeo. Yeah, Rodeo Stampede, right? Like you playing it, like again, from my perspective, I wouldn't play these games, you know, because I'm a different kind of player. But it clearly shows that they get to the market, you know, they get there, and there is a lot of demand for them. And like in our projections, we think VR is going to be the same. Like it's going to be many more. It's like VR is going to be, I think, even more mainstream than like, you know, console gamers, like hardcore platform compared to what VR is going to be.
Question?
So, do you think it's possible and worthwhile to encourage other players to, when they see abuse, also sort of either report it or tell the person off, or like encourage a community that
I really like that.
Where people, instead of just seeing abuse happen and sort of go, oh, it's not me, I'm going to move on.
Because I feel like that is because I know myself personally, I'm the kind of person who, if I have been the victim of abuse at times, but you kind of sometimes you're like, oh, I can just deal with it, and you just brush it off. But I think, and that is a very great point, because I think a very topical discussion right now is, especially in some dominated places, it's like if, like, you know, the saying boys will be boys, and it's like...
what does it mean?
When guys are having potentially conversations amongst themselves, they can say some stuff and, oh, but they're just saying it because boys will be boys, and they get off guilt-free. And it's, but no, and the topical discussion at the moment is that you should start calling out your friends if they say something that's negative or is going to hurt someone, even if they're not even there. And I think that's an amazing point, which I didn't even personally think of, that I would love to discuss with our team about, because I think cultivating a community of like, hey, I'll help you out, and then like maybe if that person was abused, like, I'm really grateful that you did that for me, because I was too scared or was too proud or whatever to do it myself, and now I feel a lot better for that space for it.
Sure, and you'll notice that in multiplayer games as well, that when someone else starts harassing someone, that person doesn't respond, and then another player goes and says, hey dude, that's not cool. That stops so much quicker than if the other guy...
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, no worries. Have you ever thought about, so like, all the safety discussions and things? You've been sort of focused on sexual identity and gender and harassment Have you heard about the stories that like happened in Rec Room VR with like kids and adults?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they basically just a couple of adults hanging out and just like doing things and doing sexual gestures, and like no one of them was offended by doing it. And then they realized there was like a short avatar, sort of.
Yeah. So
They realized that there was a kid watching them doing sexual gestures in an environment, and like I was thinking like a personal space bubble that solves like the groping problem, but you still see stuff that's happening away from you, like further away from you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a bit confusing issue because like Oculus, especially meant to be like you meant to be 16 and above. Like that's like the communication in terms of platform holders to what's age appropriate is very muddy right now, right? Like when you ask them, you never get the I think it says 16, but clearly like tons of kids, parents buying these devices for kids all day long. So for me, like I don't think for kids it shouldn't be there personally. Like or it has to be specific experiences which are extremely supervised. So like like 100% structure is going to be adult there present, right? Because I think it's like VR is super dangerous for kids. Like I don't think like I wouldn't want my kid to be anywhere close to VR, regardless of any safety features which are there or not, because like it just like like would you allow your kid to be with a room with a person who you don't know, right? That's a question, right? And the answer is no. Like it's the same in VR. Would you allow your kid to be in a room with a person you don't know? So
and I think that people don't realize like that point that I was trying to drive home before, that VR experiences feel like real life experiences, is that when you're actually a potential abuser, when they're in VR, they still feel like they're an avatar, because there is a level of anonymity, because you don't have a face in VR, it's someone else's, or you're a floating helmet or whatever. But then the consequences do have very real life repercussions, and that's something that I really want to make sure that really drives home with everyone that understands, because if there are and people can just go around because like they don't think, oh, it's fun to troll people, but like no, this is really serious.
I think people want to go to the party. Guys, do you want to go to the party?
Oh, is it start?
No, it's starting soon. So
okay.
Any more questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to add that to that performance, one of the interesting things about the power gesture in Quiver is that it actually makes the target's avatar disappear from the game world, which basically annihilates a lot of the potential harm, and it also makes you invisible to them. So if you're dealing with someone who is, say, making silly gestures or doing something that you find objectionable, then it's actually a very non-invasive way to just get that off the screen without necessarily affecting them directly. But
unfortunately, they don't get many, like, there's no real negative consequence for them. It's just you're kind of protecting yourself, which I think it's an amazing feature, but I wish that they had taken it a step further where there would actually be some consequence to the abuser.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm writing about that very point.
Yeah.
So.
Didn't they say that as they do that, it pushes the person away? I think they mentioned it in the article that with power gesture, it actually propels the other person away. And it kind of shows to them that I'm not enjoying this.
Kind of related to that, but like, could you implement like shadow banning kind of, so that like the person could still exist in the world and potentially see other people in a world, in a social environment, but nobody else would get to see them, and they'd eventually like get the isolation from that. Sorry, I kind of thought
that's a great idea.
One of the Black Mirror episodes that kind of has something like that in real life. But like, do you think that could potentially work for discouraging?
I would love to put that in there and then like and play test it to see how that would work, because this is why I was getting really excited, because it's like these are really amazing ideas which are kind of like revolutionizing what we think is safety in game design, and
I think it's definitely a good idea. Like I mean, it's 5-second implementation, so there is nothing wrong to test it. But I think it's a lot of different. But the key is just to get the people, before. I think in terms of technical side, in terms of how you develop it, like it's really important to get as many users into your app before it actually hits market, right? And then you can answer this question in the environment which is on your terms, you know, because you get like 100 people, 200 people, it's a good representation, especially if it's like randoms. And then you're going to get your abuser and you're like, okay, that's how we're going to deal with guys like that, right? And then and I think that's how we try to develop, is just don't worry about when we launch, is worry about be ready. Actually, when you say safe, and then like it's the worst thing when like, you know, a lot of developers can go and say, hey, you know, it's going to be multiplayer in the game, and then people start playing and there's no multiplayer in the game. You don't want to be like you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There is like safety features in the game, and then because like as soon as you put safety on, like there's going to be like people like I used to be 15 years ago, I'll be like, there's safety features, all right, let's go in and test the safety features, you know, and then you're gonna like you basically make a target on your back, right, straight away. So you really have to test well and like launch in stages to make sure that when you come with this target on your back, you actually can deliver on your promise.
I like that idea because testing it is non-invasive. Like what I was talking about with Patrick Harris, like I would never want that to happen ever again. Like that was just a horrendous thing that he did, which I'm not glad that it happened, but I'm glad that it's something we can talk about, because I think even just describing it is absolutely terrifying, and it wouldn't make any developer want to try that. Not that I don't know why he did it in the first place.
What was the point? What was he trying to gain or prove?
Like I think.
Well, because he can, right? That's like that's the most stupidest thing, but that's what human beings do, right? Like because I can, right? And
What you suggested was really good, that you ban someone for a couple of minutes when they do something and get reported straight up. Ban them for 5 minutes and like, what's it called? Incremental, what's the word? Exponentially.
Oh yeah, I like that too.
The more they do anything. So if you've repeated something 3-4 times, that's it. You're banned for 24 hours. For, you know, a week, whatever.
Or life, like League of Legends just bans people like left and right.
Like on League, you get like if you drop out of a game, you have to wait. Why don't you have to wait if you know you've been harassing someone?
Yeah.
I think there was one more comment just over here. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just on that anything where you have an automatic response to a report or abuse or whatever. No, the problem there is that the person who is abusing can then use that reporting system to abuse other people. If you have no way of, if you don't do anything to verify that report before you act on it, then somebody who wants to abuse somebody, wants to harass somebody, can just report them.
Yeah.
And then they get banned for 2 minutes, and they're like, haha, I banned you for 2 minutes.
No, but I think the key is there's actual algorithms there, and that's where League is really, you know, Riot is really good, because you can actually use data to determine what's happening. Like it's not.
So using data to determine who is actually being abused. But that immediate response has its own set of problems.
Yeah, but you can determine it pretty fast, like because like generally, like if you have the one person which is like banning people and like, you know, reporting people, and then he's being reported on, like statistically it's probably 97% it's like that they're the abuser. Like that's how it goes. Because like you just like, you know, if you have big data set, you just look at each individual behavior and you're like, oh, this is a pattern. Like, and if you have more than 1,000 users, it's pretty, like, I mean, obviously at the time it's a little bit, you know, iffy, but like you can, like within like 5 minutes, you can know what's happening just from automatically from the data. You don't need to, you know, you don't need to go in a situation where like, oh, he reported me, I reported him, who is, you know, who is right, who is wrong, because then you will, you know pretty quickly just from the data. Yeah.
Also maybe in VR, because you have the position of your track hand controllers, you can actually determine if that person actually stick the hand in someone else's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You get more data that you can actually analyze and
even
automate something like that. If you do that too many times, maybe it just automates you without.
Well, because you can definitely say in VR who entered whose space, like 100%. Like there's nothing like, you know, because like, hey, you know, two bodies was here, one didn't move, one moved. You know, you already like it's very like on technical side, like at this time, you know, right now, like reporting, like you can do whatever you want to do, but it's pretty easy to know who did the bad thing in the first place. Like it's more, and that's why like Riot is very good at banning like for life straight away, because they look at the data and they're like, hey, according to our past data, you know, this kind of behavior generates this kind of outcomes. There's not even point for us putting them on probation, because when you already did probation, like on, you know, 500,000 users beforehand, like it doesn't work, ban, insta-ban, right? Same as like Blizzard does and all these companies, because like as soon as you, like, you know, same as like when you do mobile game, you know, some mobile companies can say how much money this user is going to generate from being just like 5 minutes in the game. Just from 5 minutes playing the game, they know how much money going to get like 2 years down the road because they just can match behaviors. I
So
think
we have 5 minutes left if anyone has any like last things. Otherwise, yeah, this is really fantastic and I learned a lot, honestly.
No, thank you for
thank you so much for coming along. This is like my first presentation at this kind of event ever, so I'm really glad that it was a positive experience. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.